So, what exactly do you mean when you say, what do you mean?
I do not understand this. This really confuses me.
What's that supposed to mean?
Literally.
What's that supposed to mean?
What's that supposed to mean?
I don't know what you're talking about.
What are you talking about?
What's that supposed to mean?
Cultural anthropologist Ujwal R. Kalgood and Motive Base president Jason Partridge will tell you that perception and meaning are the primary pressure points that shape and create the world we live in.
Inconceivable! You keep using that word.
Let's explore why meaning matters.
I don't think it means what you think it means.
Now, here's your host, Aaron Trafford.
All right, welcome into the show, Why Meaning Matters. In the room, as always, with Ujwal and Jason. Last two episodes, we were focusing in on the changing meanings around two fairly large sectors in retail. We were talking about home decor, interiors, and fashion, and how we dress ourselves, and the overall shifts in perceptions that have occurred over the last few years with respect to those specific sectors and the meaning around home and fashion. But here's the thing, is that a lot of that shift with those two conversations was really expedited as a result of the pandemic. We were at home a lot more, so we were thinking about what home meant. We were changing the way we were dressing ourselves, so we were thinking about fashion in different contexts. But here's the other part of this issue, guys, and I don't know if you're feeling this, but there's this ground level shift also in the last couple of years. I'm going to drop kind of a scary term, just about disease in general and how we interact with the meaning around infection, disease at a personal level and at a cultural level. So I know that was shifting from talking about Louis Vuitton and Coach purses to talking about infectious disease, but I think we need to talk about this.
It's okay. We've gone from outside the body to inside the body. It's totally
okay. Brilliant.
Natural transition.
That's perfect.
Very good side.
Yeah,
Natural transition. Yeah.
Love it. So how has disease, the meaning that we place on that concept, is it even a concept? Is it a term? What is it? How do we see it now?
I mean, I'll start with the most obvious one, which is immune health. The average level of knowledge and education on what is immune health and what does it do for you in helping you fight off infections and dealing with infections. That average level of knowledge and education has completely changed and grown massively in the last couple of years. And, if you're a listener, let's say working in the supplement market, you might be thinking, oh yeah, but I'm seeing sales of immune supplements flip-flop. 6 months they rise, 6 months they drop. But that's because as much as the knowledge around immune health and its value for infectious disease has increased, people are still very confused about how to improve their immune health, about how to manage their immune health. So this is a very, very rich territory. And by the way, improving immune health is no longer just about popping a pill. People realize suddenly that, hang on a second, sleep has a role. Food has a role. My stress levels has a role. So this is truly a holistic approach to immune health, which a lot of us have, would have imagined would have happened sooner. But in many ways, the pandemic has finally brought this culture to bear.
Can I just ask you, be the stupid person in the room and just make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying? Remember back in season 1, I think it was the last episode or the second to last one, when you painted this picture of meaning as a solar system. Mm-hmm. So that there's this big sun in the middle, but then there's all these other planets around it. Is that what we mean? If we're looking at infectious disease as the big sun, all these other things are around it now that are shifting around. Okay.
Exactly. If we looked at, and let's use that analogy, if you look at the closest planets to the sun 2 years ago, they were not about immune health. Yeah. They were about specific diseases that usually affected others. Developing countries in the East, countries that had, certain problems with population density, blah, blah, blah. So in North America, certainly, we always thought, that's not for us. Right now, if you look at the closest planets to the sun, it's about my immune health, my family's, my kids' immune health. So that's the shift and the change. And by the way, Aaron, not even close to being the stupidest person in the room.
No, that's clearly me.
Because
it's always, as Ujwal clearly points out, it's always Jason. Don't worry.
Because that question itself was an incredibly intelligent question. So just let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah. All right. Well, I just like to keep the obvious question, front of mind.
I mean, not to go down the kind of the academic wormhole, but I mean, as we talked about previously, when we think about how big and dominant is something in culture and how prevalent is it in its mind, a topic or a trend or an idea like, immune health is only as big as the things that people are associating with it. So what has changed over the last couple of years? As Ujwal mentioned, a couple years ago, it was associated with things that were external. It was further away. They were smaller issues that didn't play as big a role in the mind of Americans. And as a result, it really kind of only held up so much space. But COVID has interrupted our lives. It's made us think differently about the role of disease. It's made us think differently about how disease is shared or how it's passed. And as a result, the associations that people are making with something like immune health have increased in size, and immune health has taken on that weight. It has grown. It has literally expanded in culture to become more dominant. And that's why it's really kind of driving a lot of changes all the way down from kind of how we're thinking about how we live our lives, but also in the choices that we're making and, kind of how we're actually behaving on a day-to-day basis.
How at a cultural level, though, does this play out? Because I'm reminded of what we talked about with respect to fashion, that there's a certain element of accessing this new meaning of fashion that is privileged based, right? You have to have the means and the income to afford the fashion. And in this case, you also have to have that supplemental budget in your household income to spend on the supplements or the green juicing or all of those other things. So how is that changing the way when we talk about the conversation with the other?
Yeah, it's both a sad but in many ways also a positive realization that many consumers are having. If you look at sleep itself, it's such a privilege in America, right? Because if you look at somebody, you take a single mother who's in a lower income household. She's probably working shift jobs and holding 3 jobs together, barely has time to take care of her kids, can't sleep. How can she improve her immune health? She can't, in the same way that somebody else who's got a 9-to-5 job, has the luxury of working from home, has a income of over $100,000, is in a nice home. That single mother just can't, right? So there is an equity problem with immune health, and for the first time, the reason I said it's sad but also positive is that for the first time, people who are not in that position, so the middle class, the upper middle class, for the first time, all of these consumers are sitting up and taking notice and realizing, holy smokes, we have not realized how much of an inequity there really is. Because when we think about infectious disease, whether it can kill you or not, the point is that not all of us have the same ability to build our tolerance, our immune health to fight and ward off these infections.
And I think even at a higher level, that group of people that previously may not have been considering the other have been forced to experience a vulnerability that they've never had to experience in their lives. So they've been afraid for the first time in their lives. There's a little bit of hyperbole in this, but let me go forward with it. The nation was faced with an existential nightmare, and they had to contemplate mortality, and they had to think about the role of community, and they had to think about how can we basically make choices that will protect others, which will inherently protect me, right? Because the choices that I'm making are now going to have an impact on other people, and the choices that other people are making, I really understand how they're going to impact me now. So now all of a sudden, when we start to think about marginalized communities, when we start to think about racial groups that, kind of are forced into working situations where they don't have the benefit that other people have, it starts to beg the question, are we doing things the right way? And are there changes that we should be making that, while yes, will benefit larger groups of people, I now understand how they will ... ladder back to and help me. And that, I think, is a really, really important thing to take into consideration.
This feels like we're in a volatile planetary system. Like there's lots of, I'm going to go with this analogy, lots of asteroid fields here, because when we look at the picture we just drew, which is if we put disease at the center with immunity and immune support and those kinds of things growing in weight and therefore privilege, that and to what you just said, Jason, that brings up all of these sub issues around how our healthcare system is functioning, and then these other emotions about anger towards people who maybe don't see it the way that we see it. I think that's what we're seeing play out in the States right now in this very moment, right? This is actually like I hate to say this, but it's a life or death issue.
Absolutely. You know, there's a great line that one of our researchers was telling us yesterday, and Jason, correct me if I'm misrepresenting this, but it was about how when we were doing this research, we found consumers who've experienced some sort of an infectious disease, whether it's the flu or even COVID, and were okay the last time, they have this feeling that they're now good. They'll be just as okay the next time. And that's a huge barrier in educating them and in getting them to understand that that's not a guarantee.
And I think that this is the challenge that we're going to see. And again, will this change how people are thinking about what the role of government is? Absolutely. Will this also change expectations that they're going to have at the corporate level as well, though? Because again, now what we're starting to see is this shift in beliefs and values. We're starting to see this shift in this expectation that it's all about me. And this is the big kind of question. Again, it's very early days. We're still in kind of the nascency of seeing how this is going to impact things. But if we start to see that there is more of a collective understanding of working together to rally around a shared set of beliefs or values in order to push forward the common good. I mean, that is a big idea. That's a big construct. But now think about companies that are really thinking about their purpose. Think about companies that are really starting to basically prove that they're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk. What does that mean for consumers that are getting on this train? And now all of a sudden there is a brand or a retailer or a corporation that is proving that they are aligned with that necessity, okay? And think about everybody that isn't doing that. Now, what starts to happen in the marketplace as a result? I mean, I think that that's the big question for us, is that, you know, and this is what we love to do, right? Like, again, changes and shifts in the idea of what an infectious disease means is going to change how we buy things.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, it doesn't just change how you go to market with new products, new solutions. It also changes what kinds of policies you have for your employees. For example, if you hire shift workers, what are small changes you can make to reduce their stress levels, to give them better sleep, to give them better access to health initiatives, to mental health and mental wellness practices, right? It's every little thing has an impact. So, you know, we had this great situation where, you know, a senior leader at a company said, oh, you have research on social cohesion. Why should I care about this? You know, I make candy. And, you know, we literally had to show him how one thing impacts the other, which then impacts the other and impacts the other. It's, you know, the domino effect. We all know this. That's how culture is. And we need to understand this, because just because it may not be obviously impacting us tomorrow doesn't mean it's not going to affect the future of our business day after.
All right. Well, you said a lot in there. I honed in on candy. So maybe the next episode we can pick up on the changing meaning of like, what I want to say is our recreation, our fun, our joy, how that has shifted from the pandemic. I feel like I want to pick your guys' brains on that too. Candy is one of my joys.
Same here, especially sour ones.
All right. Okay. So this was Why Meaning Matters, Season 2, Episode 3. Thanks for listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, share with your friends, and drop us a line if you have a question or a comment for us. hello@storystudionetwork.com. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Why Meaning Matters with Ujwal R. Colgood, Jason Partridge, and your host, Aaron Trafford.
Inconceivable! You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Why Meaning Matters is produced for Motive Base and the Story Studio Network by Eye Contact Productions.